So with NBA free agency underway, there's already been a couple big moves. We had Paul George to the Sixers, Klay Thompson to the Mavericks, and most recently Demar Derozan to the Sacramento Kings. However, with all these changes taking place, I've often asked myself, does any of this actually even matter in the end? And what I mean by that is if you look at recent times, stars and superstars teaming up hasn't really led to anything in the end in terms of winning and success. And I talked about this already on my video on the harsh truth about NBA super teams, but ultimately the point is that you shouldn't really get too excited about any of the moves being made. And that's obviously because there isn't any way to actually predict how good any of these teams will be. I mean, just look at the Sixers. They just added Paul George to a team that should have already been good enough to make the conference finals if Embiid was healthy, and yet I don't see anyone claiming that they're going to win the NBA championship or even make the NBA finals. Heck, some people, me, don't even think they're gonna make it past the second round. Embiid, Maxey, and Paul George is essentially a big three, and yet no one really believes in them that much. Look at the Mavericks, who just added Klay Thompson to a team that just came from the NBA finals, and yes, while I know Klay Thompson isn't in his prime anymore, he's still a guy who just a year ago made 300 3-pointers on 41.2% three-point shooting, which has only been done by Steph Curry in the history of the NBA. And last year, he still did shoot 38.7% on 9 attempts a game, which is still absurd. And now add him to a team that already has Luka and Kyrie, who just came from the NBA Finals, and yet no one can say for sure whether the Mavs will make it out of the West next year. And then you have the Sacramento Kings, who were already a really good team that just underperformed last year, just added Demar Derozan to their squad, and people are questioning whether they can even be a top 5 seed in the West next year. And aside from the major stars, you also have some really good moves that were made, like the Knicks adding Mikal Bridges and the OKC Thunder adding Caruso and Hardenstein. These moves filled out the rosters for two teams that were already really great teams, and no one can say for sure whether they're even going to make the conference finals. I've been watching the NBA for a long time, and about 10 to 15 years ago, a lot of these moves would have made some of these teams the Vegas favorites. However, in 2024, they're just another team. Looking at the odds, the two teams that arguably made the biggest moves would be the 76ers and the Mavericks, and on the list of odds, the Sixers are 4th place and the Mavericks are 7th. Other teams that made some pretty good moves, like the OKC Thunder and the Knicks, are 3rd and 6th respectively. And the Sacramento Kings are all the way down at 18th. Somehow below the Clippers, who just lost Paul George, have an aging Harden, and even if they do make the playoffs, we all know Kawhi Leonard will probably be hurt. So I say all this to say, while free agency is always exciting, it definitely does not have the same impact that it once did. Because the sad reality is that all of these teams will most likely be a disappointment. Oh, and additionally, there's this team called the Boston Celtics, and they still exist. And they're still easily the best team in the entire league.